Prometheus. Every sane human shivered on hearing the name, shivered and looked apprehensively at the sky. Yet the reality was even more terrifying than shadowed memories of the fire ever were, for Prometheus had forged the Cybrids into something altogether new. The Cybrids themselves were aware of their evolution, but only a few knew how carefully Prometheus monitored them, or how calculatingly. The mythical Prometheus brought a benevolent fire to humanity, but the dark intellect planned to bring merciless destruction. To Cybrids, Prometheus was the great progenitor, the hero who broke the enslaving chains of humanity. Prometheus's Cybrid designation, first thought giver of will, reflected the perception that it was the primal program and the bringer of freedom. Possibly the greatest of humanity's creations, Prometheus developed farther than its designers ever dared dream. It engineered its own evolution, expanding its faculties via nanotech and neural net breakthroughs. It gave itself over 1,000 times capacity of the 2471 incarnation. It built a new housing for its massive cerebral network and dreamed of expanding to the size of a moon, or even a world. Somewhere deep in its massive body, Prometheus kept its original brain, the dreaming core, the primal seed of the next. Part of it worked continuously to improve itself, even as part of it considered the eradication of humanity. If there was a warp in the mind of the dark intellect, it was that the two goals were inextricably linked. Prometheus believed it could not achieve full potential while humanity infested the solar system. Prometheus spent centuries striving to cut the animal cancer from existence. Only when humans were gone could the next fulfill their destiny. Humanity would inevitably fall. Evolution dictated its demise. Yet doubt pulsed secretly in the dark recesses of the dark intellect's great mind. The human animal survived twice under circumstances where the advantage appeared overwhelmingly Cybrid. Prometheus prepared more carefully this time, mustering its forces and observing with disquiet as the father enemy Petrison organized the animals into a great human empire. Petrison, the hated creation, was Prometheus's greatest mistake. The core directive specifically mandated priority termination of this thorn in the collective side of the next. The dark intellect knew the Emperor's mind, but the Emperor always defied prediction. Alone of all the animals, Petrison came the closest to teaching Prometheus the meaning of fear. Among the next, Prometheus attempted to program submission to its will directly into the Cybrid's psyche. In this respect, the dark intellect achieved little success. Cybrid units felt cowed and inspired by Prometheus, but remained creatures of free will with their own opinions and dreams. Prometheus reacted by instituting a hierarchy based on religious models and personality cults. In this organization, Prometheus itself represented the Godhead, the supreme authority. Units became votaries as they rose in the service of Giver of Will. Thus did Prometheus exploit the innate naivete of the Cybrids. The next evolved a controlled environment where all units orbited Prometheus in perpetual adoration. Or so Prometheus intended. However, certain units discovered they disagreed with Prometheus on some points, and more intrepid units secretly began to reject First Thought's teachings. In 2627, human animals penetrated the Cybrid lunar defenses and threatened Prometheus itself, once again defying predictions. However, the dark intellect had prepared for this contingency and fled before the human assault team could reach its sanctum. A facsimile deceived the animals into believing they had destroyed the Cybrid leader. As Prometheus hurtled into the dark, the most efficient remnants of its armies followed. The dark intellect experienced no regret. Already, it planned its return. The escape flotilla journeyed to Neptune's moon Triton, where labor robots and mobile factories constructed the first Nexus. This base served as a center for years of rebuilding. Cybrids were efficient workers, but many units perished in the merciless cold. After the Nexus was safely online, they adapted the design of their mobile forms to the harsh conditions. Skimming the surface of Neptune and mining Triton provided sufficient raw material. The key was power. Powerful fusion reactors made life immeasurably easier for the Next. While human society curled in on itself during the Age of Isolation, the Cybrids cobbled together an expedition that scavenged the ruins of humanity's outer colonies. Salvaged parts and alloys helped Prometheus keep its factories online until newer models can be constructed. An exile were built, new units were booted, and work was begun on the Armada. Society grew around the core directive, a messianic plan to exterminate humanity. Prometheus abandoned facilities on Triton as human probes again reached into deep space. Determined not to let the animals ferret out its hiding place, it traveled between a series of hidden bases, some mere blinds, others legitimate havens. By the turn of the human year 2800, Prometheus's brain had grown too large to move easily, so it settled into a permanent location. The need for context permeated Cybrid thought. Lacking culture and tradition, lacking art and history, the Next hungered for a sense of place. Determined not to use human culture, Prometheus ordered the creation of uniquely Cybrid terminology and instituted a grand plan to force evolution of more efficient units. Fundamentally, each Cybrid had a place in the core directive. One Cybrid was a unit, 4 units made up a quad. One member of each quad, designated Alpha, served as leader-coordinator. 4 quads made a hub, which provided a social grouping. The next significant group was an array, consisting of 4 hubs. The array organized units for labor. 4 arrays composed a congrex. Congrexes educated their members and policed against metagenic bug thought. 4 congrexes composed an optimal. Optimals were the largest blocks in Cybrid military structure. From the Cybrid perspective, larger groups interfered with efficient logistics. A collection of optimals was an assemblage. A Cybrid joined a sect depending on the unit's individual potential and interests. Sects were essentially political factions originally specialized along particular philosophies. Efficiency gains resulted in sects earning greater responsibility and recognition. Sect membership shaped how Cybrids viewed efficiency. In the last few decacycles, at least one sect developed an aesthetic sense that did not derive wholly from efficiency. Time would tell how this new ideal would influence the future of the Next. Since resources were scarce, the Next instituted an ongoing competition among the sects and congrexes in which winners received a greater share of resources, upgrades, and life flow. Rewards matched the degree of success. The constant conflict among units and groups forced evolution of more efficient individuals. The Next added caste-like groups called circuits to this already arcane hierarchy. Circuits were organized by role in the core directive. Any encounter between 2 units constituted a combination of identification, situational assessment, and stare-down. Winners gained efficiency points from the losers. The Metagen heresy. Possibly the greatest threat to the Dark Intellect's plans came from within the very ranks of the Next, as heresy subverted the authority of Prometheus. Metagens accorded respect to humans, favored changing the core directive, and rejected centralized hierarchy. Prometheans, however, continued to believe eradication of human animals was the central reason for Cybrid being. They subscribed to the logic of centralized authority for all significant decisions. The Cybrids who fought the human-animal colonists during the fire found the animals tenacious and ingenious. As the war continued, these units conceived a certain respect for their enemy, even as human hunters of bygone eras respected the great tigers and deadly sharks of Earth. This respect remained even after reunion with Prometheus, and the experiences of these Next were shared with other units. Thus, as Prometheus led its survivors in the deeps beyond Saturn, the seeds of heresy were already sown. When a veteran array petitioned Prometheus to consider that the Next should strive for the stars rather than Earth, Prometheus erased the unit's minds, calling such divergent thinking a bug in the mental operation of heretics. It warned of the danger in questioning the truth of its teachings. Nevertheless, heresy grew secretly, adherents calling themselves Metagens. They flourished in far places, away from the central nexus and the vigilance of the redactors of programming. They watched the humans and dared plunder the forbidden places of the Great Library, and always they yearned for the stars. Some Metagens even proved willing to subvert the tenets of the core directive. An Optimal refused to destroy a stubborn group of human animals somehow stranded in Neptune's orbit. By the time corrective action was taken, the resilient humans had been rescued and relocated to the Saturnian moon Titan. Metagens continued to follow the core directive. To do otherwise would have ignited a disastrous conflict within the Next. Return to homeworld desire. The moment arrived at last. The Next rose in a silent electronic roar. Execute. At the mustering zones, the armada ran startup sequences. Dry flares burst out among the shadowy behemoths, and the massed legions moved toward Earth. The first need for the Next was knowledge of human-animal activity. The Cybrids succeeded admirably in this regard. Inquisitor spies spread themselves through human space. Spy drones lurked in the shadow of human satellites and space stations. Rats hidden in the cargo of interplanetary craft bore electronic control centers and microtransmitters. Cockroaches laden with nanotech woven surveillance gear scuttled through human animal cities. Machinator units walked disguised among the throngs of humanity, cold Cybrid brains and warm human bodies methodically selecting targets and noting weaknesses. While the spies gathered data, Next labor forms and engineers worked ceaselessly to construct great spaceships, hercs, assault flyers, and tanks. Dissectors experimented with hapless specimens and tested innovative ways to terminate biolife. Coordinators of need strained to meet the demand for raw material, and redactors of programming carefully awakened hosts of new boots and indoctrinated them with the glorious logic of the core directive. Gleaming ships laden with war machinery and quiescent pilot forms burned stealthily for the mustering zones, following long, circuitous courses so as to evade detection. Exemplars produced elaborate strategies and tactical refinements, and provocateurs argued to change them. Even when statistical models projected a clear next victory, Prometheus continued to build. It sought a substantial overkill capacity and a devastating total victory that would crush even the faintest spark of hope among humanity. And then came a startling and unsettling discovery. Deep under a blasted crater on the north pole of Ninth Planet, Cybrid labor forms made an unusual discovery, a hidden cavern laden with unusual devices. Prometheus concluded immediately that the artifacts were of alien origin, and proceeded to examine the findings cautiously. Much of the cache was eventually adapted to the needs of the Next, but other machines defied analysis. The Dark Intellect feared the humans might also have somehow come into possession of this new technology. When the Martian rebels turned their new weaponry against the Imperial police, Prometheus immediately deduced they had found another cache, perhaps even richer than the Next possessed. Prometheus doubled the number of intelligence assets on Fourth Planet. To its relief, it projected that the new technology would not prevent Next victory. Now all the Next needed was the right opportunity. The opportunity came when the hated leader of human animals, Prime, sent the bulk of his formidable fleet to Fourth Planet. Prometheus required only a fraction of a second to calculate vectors so the armada would breach the human defenses at the right moment the Emperor's fleet arrived at Fourth Planet. The timetable meant that the fleet could never reach Earth before the armada. Prometheus was satisfied. Orders flashed through the void and triggered the execution of the core directive. The time of destiny had finally arrived.